Hello and welcome to this webinar which is an introduction to our soft skills philosophy and strategy. My name is Dr. Alan Redman. I'm a chartered psychologist. I practice in the area of work and organisational psychology. I'm also the head of science and technology at Psycruit, which means I'm responsible for the development of our psychometrics, assessments and other soft skills technologies which we'll be touching upon today. So during this session I'll be talking about these subjects. The aim of the webinar is to paint a picture of the emerging and growing importance of soft skills to modern jobs and organisations. So we'll take a look at what soft skills are and how they differ from hard skills. We will be examining the science behind a soft skills approach, as well as covering some specific recommendations for how to recruit for them. We'll also be looking at what other soft skills certification is available, in other words opportunities to explore the field in greater depth. So let's start with where we are at the moment, the emerging picture. Over the last few years there's been a number of helpful white papers, surveys, think pieces around the changing picture around soft skills. An example would be a couple of reports we're going to look at from Deloitte, as well as the World Economic Forum, both of which set the scene of soft skills coming to dominate the shape of future work. The Deloitte survey, for example, has found that according to the employers, organisations, business leaders surveyed, jobs which draw heavily on the soft skills of the individuals performing them are set to increase at a much greater rate than other types of jobs over the next 5 to 10 years. Deloitte found that by 2030, so I guess that's just under 10 years time, those jobs which are soft skills intensive will be nearly 2/3 of jobs, which is a big change from the picture we're at now. The World Economic Forum's report, which was released in 2020, very recently, and takes into account not only underlying trends and changes to the design of work and jobs, but also takes into account changes provoked by the current COVID situation. This report has found that it has accelerated certain trends within the workplace. One example being a change in the skill groups which employers see as becoming increasingly important over the next 5 years. The kinds of skills that the employers, business leaders, organisations included in the report described were these. So these were the most important ones. We can see here a mixture of skills and approaches and behaviours which we would characterise classically as soft skills. So some of them are emotional in nature, so something about your mental toughness, your abilities to respond to demands, high task demand, problems, challenges such as resilience and stress tolerance. Some self-management around those emotions as well, as self-management in terms of task style, autonomy, responsibility. And some, what on the face of it look quite cognitive skills around critical thinking, analysis and problem solving, as well as something which is, I guess, looks a bit more personality on the face of it, and flexibility. So a range of skill groups rising in importance over the next 5 years, none of which we would characterise as I guess classic hard skills qualities. They also found that in the business leaders that they surveyed, that 94% of those leaders expected employers to have to pick up and develop these new skills on the job. And there's a couple of things going on there. First of all, they felt that actually it was quite difficult to find the soft skills in the candidate population on the job market. But also they felt that because jobs are changing at pace, then even those, you know, with a certain foundational level of soft skills would still need to yeah, do some more development once they're in role. And actually that was a figure that was up 30% from 2 years ago. So again, a kind of sign that the pace seems to be accelerating. We pull out this kind of statistic because it has implications later on for the way that certain measures of soft skill work in relation to learning on the job. So I will be reflecting back on this in due course. So what are soft skills? It's a good place to start. Here in the UK, the term soft skills has been around for a long time. At periods in certain very traditional organisations, industries, it had quite a pejorative tone to it. Soft skills were the kind of fluffier end of proper training in you know, very traditional organisations. And it's one of those terms perhaps where we all kind of feel we know what it means without ever taking time to really clarify precisely what the term relates to. And I think it's important, given we're talking about them today, that we just spend a few moments, I guess, making it more concrete. So I guess the first thing to say about soft skills is they are definitely psychological in nature. So it's really any attribute that can be classified as a psychological trait. Something about the individual which is personal to them, makes them different from other people. So that's a very important quality. It's something which is less concrete than certain attributes within the individual that we would relate more to hard skills. It's an attribute which in some way is driving, directing, guiding the range of behaviours and responses the individual will demonstrate. So the area of psychological traits we're most concerned with are those which relate to behaviour when you're working on your own, with others, in relation to task demands, so how you think and how you learn and how you respond broadly to demands and challenges within the role. And if you think back to the list of top valued soft skill groups from the World Economic Forum survey, those were primarily around flexibility, creativity, interpersonal style, and so on. It was kind of how the individual was doing the job. So I guess the kernel of it is soft skills really are what shapes your behaviours at work and therefore drives your performance. And that's another distinction we're going to draw from hard skills, one around performance. So yeah, I guess in the theme we're exploring today, we're looking at things which are personal to the individual. It differentiates them from other people. It is a source of where behaviours come from, and actually it's those behaviours which drive performance in their role. When we think and talk about soft skills, here are some of the attributes that we work with our clients, all valuable skills within the workplace, certainly within the modern workplace. Yeah, and all ones to a greater or lesser extent we can do work with. So I've touched on the distinction between soft skills and other attributes, hard skills in this case, a few times. So let's dig a bit more deeply into that. So I guess some key qualities of soft skills are around what they are really in response to, and we view them very much as a 21st century model of employment. So it's the nature of jobs now which really are placing the emphasis on soft skills, and these are jobs and organisations which have a performance focus, where the soft skills are really required because there is a higher pace of change, either within the organisation itself or the broader market or context. There's lots of ambiguity, fluidity. People have to be agile, and I guess that's a reflection of change, but it's also a reflection of organisations themselves, which perhaps have to become less fixed and less processy than perhaps was the case more historically. Soft skills tend to be self-learned and generally are based on experiences that the individual has been through, traits they've already got. So they tend to be something which is kind of specific, particular to the individual's track record and kind of yeah, I guess inheritance in terms of the kind of more innate psychological traits they bring to bear. They're not specific to a particular industry and role, and we'll dig deeper into this. Because they're kind of less concrete, I think they're sometimes viewed as harder to work with, tricky to measure, tricky to identify, maybe tricky to attract. When we look at the qualities that way, the contrast with hard skills is quite distinct. So hard skills we would view as a more of a 20th century model of employment, one where there was a productivity focus rather than a performance focus, where jobs and organisations changed more slowly, where jobs and organisations tended to be more rigid and process based, and these sorts of hard skills which were essential to productivity and doing the job were ones which were taught or trained rather than learned by the individual. The hard skills themselves would tend to be specific to the job, the role, demands within the job, or even to an industry, and could be measured through concrete outcomes, because often the hard skill would lead to a very clear, very concrete output. So when you put them side by side, the distinction is clear. What we're not arguing is that hard skills are now an irrelevance. They are not, and productivity is still a focus for businesses and organisations. What we're arguing is they will become decreasingly important, and what we're also arguing above that is they are not the thing which really makes the difference to performance at work, and they are not the thing which differentiates individuals from each other. However, employers do need both, or continue to need both, certainly in relation to certain jobs. LinkedIn conducted a survey earlier this year, and they wanted to find out yeah, what are the most in-demand skills of 2020, and they're able to base that on their LinkedIn learning platform. So actually, I guess using data of directly from what people were looking for. And they found this. They found top 10 hard skills and top 5 soft skills. And it's kind of interesting to look at the two lists, because I think when you look at the top 10 hard skills, that's very now, and it's difficult to imagine a lot of those would have appeared in that list 5 years ago, and I guess we can speculate how many of them will be in the list in 5 years' time. So there's something about hard skills and the way work and organisations are changing at the moment, which makes them a bit more, I don't know, ephemeral. They can come and go. Whereas you look at the 5 soft skills, arguably those have been around a while, and you can't see those falling out of favour or ever being unhelpful or irrelevant to performance in the modern workplace. So there's something about some soft skills now becoming the more foundational quality that people need to bring to bear at work, whereas hard skills can come and go. Yeah, there's something kind of a bit more to go into with hard skills development, which we'll touch on in a moment. So I guess we've alluded to why soft skills are important, but let's make it more explicit. So certainly the World Economic Forum report has been published this year and takes COVID into account, as well as the changes which were present in the workplace anyway. So I guess before COVID, they could already see a picture around automation. And what they found was that automation tends to take out jobs soonest, which have the more hard skills focus. That's because it's easy to get machines to replace or simulate hard skills than soft skills. And they argue that by over the next 5 years, around 85 million jobs will shift from humans to machines, and most of those will be hard skills reliant. Deloitte found that, or speculated that 97 million new roles could emerge, requiring a new division of labour between humans, machines and algorithms. And the humans obviously are bringing the kind of soft skills part of that. In the World Economic Forum report, that was countered somewhat by COVID. So in different conditions, yes, these new jobs, these new types of role would be growing and emerging, but of course the pandemic is putting the brakes on the economy globally, which of course is suppressing creation of new jobs. So we might have I guess a lower rate of new job creation than we might otherwise have expected, which I guess for the remaining jobs means that yeah, there's going to be a strong need for an individual to be able to bring the soft skills to bear. Deloitte argued that by 2030, yeah, it'll be soft skill intensive occupations which will make up around 2/3 of jobs. And yeah, it'll be humans rather than machines that will be, I guess, required for those sorts of jobs. There's technology at work as well, and I guess on one level, one might think that with the rapid growth in machine learning, in automation, in what gets called artificial intelligence, actually humans will become less important as more and more of the workplace and jobs become digital. And the World Economic Forum found that 84% of employers are looking to increase the pace at which work is digitized. And there is a kind of hard skills requirement from that in terms of being able to work with the technology and be able to develop tools based on the technology. There's also a move accelerated by COVID where employers and their plans are set to move us to a situation where nearly half of the workforce are remote working. And whilst again there's a technology element to that, in terms of retaining performance, teamwork and learning, there's a strong soft skills demand on that, because you're going to be drawing on those soft skills to maintain that productivity, as well as other valuable outcomes at work, like well-being, sense of community and connection and so on. What we're seeing right now is for people in work, there has been, over the last few years, there has been an 88% growth in those taking personal development courses which have a soft skills focus. So what we're seeing is when people are in work already, the attributes they feel are going to be valuable and necessary are those soft skill ones. And yeah, the huge majority of people in work are yeah, looking to develop those. This contrasts significantly with those who are out of work, and for those who are looking to retrain or switch careers. And in those cases, there's an emphasis on learning hard skills, generally digital hard skills, maybe from that list we saw from LinkedIn Learning. There was the figure earlier on of 94% of business leaders expecting people to develop these soft skills on the job. So maybe this is kind of underlying that figure as well. But there's certainly a kind of contrast between people in work and people seeking work. Lastly, soft skills are important because of outcomes like engagement, career progression, and I guess some leadership culture as well. It's a kind of well-rehearsed figure, which can change depending where you look, about employees, when you talk to them in exit interviews, rarely leave because of a bad job. They tend to leave because of a bad manager. And I guess whilst there is a whole range of leadership models out there, what they all have at their core really is that leaders need to be drawing on their soft skills to nurture, engage, motivate, relate to their teams. In a survey with recruiting professionals, 94% of those recruiters believe that it's those candidates with the stronger soft skills who are more likely to enjoy career success, enjoy progression and promotion, than those with weaker. So definitely important to the individual as far as the recruitment industry is concerned. So far we've looked at surveys, white papers, and I guess think pieces around the future. It's good to go back to science as well, and to understand I guess what evidence there is around the importance of soft skills, and how to harness them. So let's have a look at some of the science. Well, here's some science for you: mediators and moderators. So this really is at the core of what distinguishes hard from soft skills. Hard skills are a mediator. They are like an on switch. If you don't have them, you can't perform, you can't be productive, you can't do the job. Obviously this varies across jobs. Certainly many traditional jobs are more hard skills intensive than a lot of modern jobs, but there will always be a basic level of hard skills. Even in the most white collar, soft skill job, there are still some things you need to be able to do, whether it's use the device you're working on, access to tools and software and digital stuff that you need to work with. There will be some level of hard skills. But soft skills are kind of the interesting bit, because they are moderators. They can increase or decrease performance. So once performance is kind of switched on, it's the degree to which your soft skills moderate performance which becomes important. And in the research we're going to see, it's really soft skills that determine how effective performance is going to be in a role. They moderate performance. They certainly distinguish between people in terms of how well they perform. They're more like the volume control than an off switch. I guess the other bit of science we're going to draw on is one which has been around for a while, so hopefully it's familiar to most of us on one level, and that's predictive validity. So that's essentially how well a attribute or a measure or a tool predicts performance in the role. So what we're typically dealing with here is some form of statistical measure, like a correlation, whereby we look at soft skill X and see how well that relates or predicts performance in the job. And it's used widely in assessment science and practice to understand how well certain hiring practices and measures and tools predict the job performance we need to see later on. Predictive validity matters because if you've got it, you're going to get return on investment. You're going to be, if you're actually managing to predict performance, then that's working for you. So here's a couple of examples which are based on a technique called utility analysis, which estimates the financial value of using a assessment or a measure versus kind of random selection or just average selection. If we took a job which pays 40 euros a year, if we use a tool or a construct which actually predicts performance accurately, and we use that to select people who are going to perform above average, that will return 16,000 euros per year per employee. So it's always going to be worth the effort. that you only get that back if you're using something which is accurately predicting performance, and that means it needs to be measuring something which relates to performance, like a soft skill, and it needs to be doing it in a way which is accurate and precise. You can extend the calculation that those same candidates who are performing above average in that 40,000 euro a year role will also return 32,000 euros per year more than those people who would perform below average. So those which perhaps were selected in error because you weren't using a great tool, because you weren't focusing on the right things. So it's definitely worth doing well, because yeah, the return on investment will always vastly outweigh whatever resources and costs are involved in yeah, I guess understanding people's performance accurately. There's also been a lot of research into assessment data. There was a classic and well-known study in 1998, which was based on 85 years of assessment data by Schmidt and Hunter, which looked at assessment data and pooled it to draw out what level of predictive validity we could expect from different measures. In 2016, there was a development of that by Schmidt and two other authors, O and Schaffer, and they, using more contemporary and sophisticated statistical techniques, actually drew out a slightly different picture, one which was less concerned with individual predictive validity, but kind of the approach that we should ideally take if we want to assess the things which matter to performance at work, which are soft skills. And what they found was that certain soft skills measures were vastly outperforming everything else in terms of predicting performance at work. And the first may come as a surprise because it's boring old ability. No one likes doing an ability test. IQ was deeply unfashionable all through the 2000s with the rise of EI, and I guess there's still a suspicion of overvaluing intelligence and things like IQ tests and stuff like that, and making candidates take ability tests. In actual fact, what the research from Schmidt and the others tells us is that general mental ability vastly outperforms any other form of assessment tool. As a quality, it vastly outperforms focusing on other attributes and soft skills in terms of predicting performance. But what we're not looking at really is IQ or intelligence, I guess, in the classic way. We're looking at it in a more soft skills way. So cognitive ability is probably a more helpful label, but things like common sense, judgment, your analytical power, your mental firepower, kind of how smart or clever you are. And it's important to also stress that this does not mean that we need rocket scientists and brain surgeons in every role, but you do need people whose mental firepower can match the demands, the cognitive demands of the role itself. They can demonstrate, and I think a lot of managers would call it good common sense. They can demonstrate appropriate judgment, effective problem solving, initiative, yeah, drawing on that, I guess, general mental ability that they've got. In terms of the correlation between general mental ability and performance in the role, it's very high, according to this vast study. 0.65 was higher than any other single measure. They also found that when you calculate the utility or value of using it, so in other words, how much money you get back by focusing on GMA, both in terms of what you're basing your decision on and how you're measuring it, they found that compared with being able to predict above average performance perfectly, using a tool which doesn't exist. It's entirely theoretical, a perfect prediction tool. GMA gets pretty close, and you will get 65% of the performance that you would get if you were using a perfect predictive tool. So that's a lot. It's kind of 2/3 as accurate nearly as being able to perfectly predict performance. If you base a decision on GMA and use a valid predictive tool to do it. GMA in a lot of research as well included in the study was also the strongest predictor of success at things like training and learning on the job. So it was a really good way of predicting how well someone would do in a role where they had to learn a lot of stuff, either early on or to progress. And as we saw earlier, I think organisations are, because of change, because of the fluid nature of work now, are going to place a strong value on those who can keep up, who can learn, who can adopt new skills, whether they're hard or soft. So yeah, GMA is really important. It's a really critical soft skill, but it isn't the only one. And you know, even at best, it's only really getting at potentially 2/3 of performance. Personality and those soft skills which relate to that were also kind of core to performance at work. And you know, there's a great big long list of personality traits we could focus on. These were ones which I guess kind of leapt out in research, maybe because they are the ones which are within the Big Five, for example, are the most extensively researched. So there was lots of data to draw on. But generally speaking, personality qualities like how you relate to people, how you do your tasks, how you take responsibility, kind of how warm, approachable, agreeable you are, and what your kind of emotional kind of style is, are all important predictors of the performance. And as a standalone, still quite high. So you know, nearly a kind of nearly halfway to being a perfect predictor, if you want to look at it that way. 0.46 correlation between personality as a construct or a measure of personality and performance. Finally, interviews, which obviously there's a lot of research into interviews and interview error over decades, which showed, demonstrates what happens when they go wrong. But when they go well, and this is true of a range of different interview formats, when they go well, actually they can work really well. And when I say when they go well, we'll look at what that means in a little while. But one of the, I guess, key factors is they are focusing on soft skills, and they are doing it in a kind of structured or consistent or kind of planned way. And we will return to that. But yeah, they are by no means inevitably a kind of ineffective way of predicting performance when done well. There were some hard skills which emerged from the study as well. So work samples, where you take an element of the role, make it into an assessment, and give it to people to see how well they do it. When used in kind of very hard skill intensive jobs, blue collar jobs, for example, you get a decent level of prediction, 0.58, as good as an interview. White collar jobs, though, where soft skills have a greater role, that starts to drop off. So as it turns out, it is important in terms of the type of job and the content of the job. It is important to consider when deciding whether or not to adopt a work sample to predict job performance. Job knowledge tests, so that's where we are interested in hard skills which are very specific to the role, certainly knowledge or skills and qualifications. They can do quite well as well in terms of predicting job performance. The job knowledge can be anything from carpentry to coding, whatever that job requires. If you can measure it up front, it's a pretty good predictor. But as we've seen, the expectation is over the next 5 or 10 years, hard skills intensive jobs are going to reduce significantly in number. So I guess, yeah, if we come back to this in a few years, it might be a different picture. Finally, the kind of hard skills measures, which are very traditional in terms of recruitment practice, certainly don't do so well. Biographical data, so that's kind of information about the individual, can work quite well if you are designing an actual biodata form and you do some empirical and statistical research in order to determine which biographical data actually correlate with job performance. That's a lot of work and not one that's, as far as I understand, yeah, employed terribly often nowadays. Things like academic scores and references, low predictive validity. I think we knew that from the 98 study. And when we start looking at things like years of experience, years of education, which I guess suggests level of education, very, very low. Things like things like grade point average had almost no predictive power. And then you start getting into things like age and graphology, which don't do anything. So certain hard skills qualities really are just not helpful in predicting performance, but they are being used a lot in traditional organisational processes. Finally, there is some overlap between constructs and measures of soft and hard skills, and those fall into the situational judgment test domain. These over the last 10 years have become very popular indeed amongst employers, mostly driven by the fact that they're very candidate friendly. Candidates seem to rate them over doing a test which feels hard, and also they're quite a good way of communicating something about the job and its demands and rewards. In the Schmidt-Owen-Schaffer study, it was knowledge-based situational tests which they found the most data for. So these are ones which have a stronger cognitive component than yeah, I guess ones which is more about style, and you know, not bad, not great if you're using them on their own, but part of that slightly lower validity result is because they are measuring quite a broad construct. They are straddling hard and soft skills. So well, we'll see some recommendations for how to get the most from them in a short while. The key, I guess, recommendation or conclusion from the recent Schmidt-Owen-Schaffer study was around recruitment or assessment practice. So it's what we should do with this, because those are kind of looking at each measure individually. It kind of chimes with a perceived gap in recruitment practice, where on the one hand soft skills are regarded as being really important, but they're also perceived as being hard to find, and yeah, there's also a kind of a lack of confidence within many managers and certainly interviewers in terms of how well they can actually measure them or use them to predict performance. So there's definitely work here to be done in terms of you know, recruitment practice for soft skills, and there are some broad recommendations that, you know, we would always make around having making sure that there is a formal method within a recruitment process which looks specifically at soft skills. You don't, I guess, get lost in hard skills like qualifications, experience, track record, and so on. Because we're getting into soft skills assessment where subjectivity, assessor error start becoming bigger problems, it's ensuring that there are measures in place to increase objectivity and to minimise unconscious bias. But really the, I guess, key recommendation, and this goes back to the study where we're kind of adapting from here, are looking for multiple forms of soft skill assessment, and that's kind of the single most effective way of getting the most from this as an approach in terms of predicting job performance. So again, this goes back to the 100 years of assessment data study, and that did find that GMA could account for 65% of the performance that we would want to see if we were using a perfect measure. But neither the authors nor we would argue that you should always use GMA as a standalone measure. And what the results of this analysis identified was that if you combined GMA with other forms of soft skills measure, you increased the strength of prediction even further. It's called incremental validity. If you paired GMA with personality to make the prediction, that would increase your predictive power by 20%. That's worth doing. Simply using an interview, albeit a well-designed one, will give you an 18% uplift. There is an 8% uplift to be had from hard skills. That's because even in jobs which are very soft skills intensive, there might be something they need to be able to do. But obviously those jobs where there are more hard skills required, you're going to get a bigger increment. Assessment centres, that looks like a really low figure. So if you add an assessment centre to a kind of a GMA process, you only get a 2% uplift in predictive power. To put that into context, what the results of the analysis told us is that assessment centres are very predictive. They have good predictive validity. However, that's mostly because they seem to be measuring GMA. So a lot of assessment exercises are looking at the candidates, just how smart they are, whether they're able to figure out the best approach. They also need some other forms of soft skill to draw on, I guess, to adopt the most effective behaviours. But in the end, there's a strong thinking component to most assessment centre tasks and demands. That's why they tend to overlap so much with GMA. And then finally, SJT, which do have benefits beyond measurement. They are a good attraction and two-way selection tool as well. If you combine them with other measures such as GMA, you'll get a 2% uplift. So in terms of what to do, I guess the recommendations we would make for maximising the degree of performance prediction that you can get from soft skills is to draw on these four philosophies or constructs. In terms of GMA, we would recommend including it because it is the highest predictor of performance, but also job-related learning, and it's really what powers people's reasoning, analysis, and decision-making and judgment at work. In terms of how to measure it, it doesn't have to be an ability test. Obviously, ability tests are a very direct way of doing it, but remember, assessment centres are saturated in GMA. They really underlying performance is really how well people are figuring out how to perform best in a situation. And remember that situational judgment tests as well can tap into this, so you can draw on a range of different forms of assessment to get at it. In terms of personality, so something about thinking style, interpersonal style, emotional style, but also the deeper stuff, values around motivations, culture fit drives and values and so on. It's important because these traits, these personality traits, are often what generally what drives soft skills behaviours, how people do the job, and it does give us some, I guess, insights into the strengths, the soft skills strengths that people can draw on using, their more natural or preferred style and approach. In terms of how to measure it, again, it's a very direct psychometric approach. If you use a personality questionnaire, you're going to get better or the best level of predictive validity if you use one which really taps into the soft skills you need for the role rather than the more general one. Again, assessment exercises will help you to get at personality as well as GMA, and feedback interviews. So those are interviews which are guided by the results of a personality assessment, are also a very effective way of getting a measure of this and getting a good prediction. Well, let's talk about interviews. We would call them soft skills interviews, so they need to have certain qualities in place to predict performance effectively using a soft skills focus. They are predictive because as a form of assessment, they are very interactive and dynamic, perhaps uniquely so compared to other forms of assessment. So they're definitely great at, if you have a skilled interviewer, probing and uncovering really what's going on in terms of the soft skills the person has can bring along with them. They're great for extending assessments of things like GMA or personality, so they're a great way of adding incremental validity. And you kind of get to see some soft skills in action, certainly the ones which are associated with relating to others. So you can kind of see in action how the candidate builds and fosters relationships, in this case with an interviewer. They work best when they focus on soft skills like working with others, achievement focus and style, previous experiences and reflective learning from that, and also drive and motivation. In terms of how to measure it, well, there are a range of interview designs. They don't have to be face-to-face. Naturally, given this, the current picture, live video-based and telephone interviews, again in the research, seem to work equally as well as a face-to-face interview if designed correctly. And again, mentioned them a moment ago, feedback interviews, and that's where the interviewer has some questions to use based on the individual's personality or GMA assessment, which they can follow up and explore more deeply. And yeah, sometimes we do need to assess some hard skills, and this is where something like some very job specific or job related knowledge, skills, qualifications are important. And whilst they are less predictive generally than soft skills, they can complement a soft skills assessment and contribute towards the predictability, kind of add an increment to that. And when you need to do it, actually you reach for more traditional forms of assessment, application forms and CVs. Biodata is probably the most valid way of doing it, but also the most difficult thing to develop of that list. But actually assessment centres, which are a good kind of Swiss Army knife of assessment design, can also get at hard skills, and actually can be a good way of helping us understand how quickly an individual might be able to acquire new hard skills for apprenticeships and other types of role. So there are three takeaways really from this, and three I guess principles that we would build the subsequent soft skills certification program on. The first one is that soft skills predict performance, and they also predict the ability to learn to perform even better, and they do so much better than hard skills. That's, I guess, the main foundational points. Trends and events are accelerating the pace at which soft skills are going to dominate the workplace. They're becoming more critical more quickly, and happily soft skills can also help the acquisition of new hard skills, which are also subject to change. There will be certainly new digital hard skills that require people to develop all the time as jobs and technologies change. We also know that it's combinations of soft skills assessments which predict performance the best. So GMA being the important ingredient, remember that doesn't just mean use and ability tests. There are other ways of getting at that, but the greater the breadth and diversity of soft skills assessments you can use, the better the prediction that you're getting. So we are going to be offering further soft skills modules, which leads to a certification. This was the first step. There's 3 webinars, kind of an introduction. Each of the subsequent modules go into some of the areas we've touched upon today in greater depth. So in the interviews one, we really go into the detail of how to maximize the effectiveness of interviews by adopting a soft skills approach. Again, with personality assessments, I mentioned it's the ones which tie most closely to the content of the job which are going to work the best, so it's how to do that. Ability testing, of course, is going to have the strongest overlap with GMA, so it'll be that's a helpful module on how to harness the power of the most predictive form of soft skill. We'll be looking at data-driven recruitment, so that's how to I guess ensure a feedback loop between the approaches we're taking and the performance we're getting. and that has implications not just for recruitment, but also for talent management more broadly. And all of this can lead to a very formal certification, which is BPS test user training, which equips you with the tools you need, I guess, to harness psychometrics in the most effective way. We will be getting in touch to invite you to choose which ones you're interested in. So yeah, look out for that invitation email over the next few days. All of this stuff where we talked about surveys and science, there are some references there. I'm flashing it up now, but obviously we can make slides available so you can read more widely into the source data. But we do just have some time now for any questions that haven't been handled through the chat. Those are not things I've been able to see, but yeah, I will let Laura take over and yeah, deal with any outstanding questions and queries.
Fantastic, thank you very much, Alan. There has been a few questions come through from the chat. If anyone would like to raise their hand who has a specific question, or add them to the chat as well, we can go through some in the last 5-10 minutes now. And as we're just waiting for some to come through, we have had a number of questions come through, which I can just touch on now. I think this was a great, yeah, some really nice questions coming through. So the first one was around our definition of soft skills, including cognitive skills, which I think was an interesting question. Potentially is a misconception that soft skills wouldn't include things like critical thinking or creativity or the more cognitive elements of skills, but the definition is very much incorporating all of those kind of psychological facets within it, so very much including those.
Yeah, I think the kind of historical understanding of soft skills was always it was kind of the personality bit. It was you know, often it was you know, soft skills training in a traditional workplace was felt to be how to work well with others. It was kind of that, and you know, was kind of would be described as fluffy, I guess, by some kind of hardcore managers. In actual fact, if you think about people at work, sometimes you will describe them as clever or smart, and you'll point to that as being their I guess key quality. You know, it's something about their personality. Raymond Cattell, who came up with 16PF, you know, one of the earliest models of what personality is, did include a measure of kind of cleverness. You know, it's kind of how not only your kind of hard ability to get to a right answer, but also the softer ability of a feeling of confidence and competence and around yeah, being able to tackle difficult things. So there is definitely a very strong soft skills components to well, I think what managers often call common sense.
Absolutely. I think that chimes then with another question that came up around how we reconcile predictability of tests with the individual's growth or development potential, which I think you touched on at the end there, Alan, that actually having that underlying cognitive firepower will also predict your ability to take on more knowledge and more skills.
Yeah, it was a really interesting outcome from the study, really, just how well different assessments or different constructs would predict learning. The data wasn't available for every assessment or construct type because it's less researched than job performance, but the one that came through most clearly was yeah, your kind of mental firepower. So just how quickly you can pick stuff up and I guess adopt learning is clearly important. But there are personality elements as well around just having a motivational drive to self-develop, things around flexibility of style and approach, how easy you find it to I guess do things differently. So it's a tricky area to measure. Arguably psychometrics, certainly the reliable and predictably valid ones are a good way of getting at it, but yeah, I think it's going to just get more important as well, being able to pick up new stuff to adapt and grow with work.
Absolutely. Another question that came through was around how they measure GMA, so specifically looking at the Schmidt-Owen and Schaffer study. what measures of GMA they included in there. So I'm guessing it was a meta-analytic approach, which means that there might have been a variety of different measures of GMA included in there.
Yeah, and primarily it was cognitive tests because they are the most common, certainly the most direct way of measuring GMA. It would not include IQ tests, for example, which we wouldn't use in an organisational setting, but we would recommend, and I think and certainly the data drew on this kind of approach, we would recommend, if you're going to use an ability test, use more than one type. So don't just use a verbal or a numerical, combine them, and that way you get closer to a more general measure of the person's underlying firepower. But also remember that ability tests, are getting to the very kind of cognitive bit of it, the processy bit, and it's also good to get at the kind of softer end of it as well. And it's things like assessment centres, interviews, SJTs, which can kind of give you a better sense of the GMA in action, how they're drawing on it, how they're applying it, and the kinds of decisions, judgments, or problem solving techniques people are bringing to bear.
Brilliant. Fantastic. And a couple of extra questions from Antonio here. So what's the predictive impact of the combination of GMA, personality and interviews, which I think is relating to this concept of incremental validity, which you talk about in the slides, Alan?
Yeah, so it's kind of diminishing returns. So you're never going to get to perfect just by adding those increments together. And that relates to overlap. So the reason an assessment centre adds so little to a GMA assessment is because they overlap so much. You've already assessed it and all you're doing is assessing it twice. So as you start kind of daisy chaining different assessments together, the overlap kind of grows and you kind of get to a theoretical ceiling. I don't have a figure for you because it very much depends on the precise mix of assessments you're using and the nature of the role. As a rule of thumb, I think if you're using maybe 3 types of soft skills assessment, and maybe you're getting broad GMA, style, and perhaps something deeper like values, motivations, and you've covered off the kind of these sort of essential mediating hard skills, I would imagine you're topping out at about 0.75, but yeah, that's a kind of rule of thumb rather than anything that's based on a single piece of research, just because the nature and result of that kind of sharing of overlap will vary so much across specific contexts.
Fantastic. Brilliant. And then just a final question here. So is the G factor the same as the GMA?
Kinda, yes. So the G factor, or general intelligence, is kind of a late 19th century, early 20th century concept. IQ tests grew from it, but it was this notion that underlying kind of specific abilities that people have, there was this kind of general underlying level of I guess their mental firepower. So it's not a term I would use day to day in the workplace, but it's definitely in the same space. It is that general level of resource, cognitive load management, processing, judgment, and analytical style and ability that we can bring to bear on to solve things at work, to pick the right approach, to behave in the right way.
Fantastic. Brilliant. All right, we're just getting lots of thank yous coming through now, and yeah, thank you for a great presentation. So let's leave it there for now. I have collated all these questions, so we'll make sure that anything that's gone unanswered, we will give you some answers when we send through some additional information after the session. So yes, a massive thank you to everyone for joining. Hopefully that was a nice, informative and interesting session, and there'll be more to come, as Alan suggested. So we will be sending you the slides for you to review, a link to the webinar itself, as well as information about additional certifications that we'll be running that we would love you to join us for. So yeah, a big thank you to all of you, and a big thank you to Dr. Alan Redman. Thank you very much for joining, and yeah, we look forward to speaking to you all or hearing from you all again soon.
Thanks everyone.